Hello everybody and welcome to Hometown Cable. Thanks for tuning in to our regular Sunday program. It's called What's Going On Here. Of course, I'm Bob Venn, Calvin Castine on the camera, and today we're going to be discussing times past with a well-known subject in our area, and it's a real pleasure for me to have talked, first of all, with Paul Vogel, who were my freshman and sophomore year, man I respected, and another man I respect and taught me honesty and everything else right here in my junior and senior year, Dan Maher from Champlain, New York. Good morning, Mr. Maher.
Yes, sir.
And there's no way I can call you Dan or I can call Mr. Vogel Paul. I don't care how old I get. We have an awful lot of respect for you over the years, and I just can't do it, so I'm not about to, even if you ask me.
Well, doesn't matter.
All right. We're just the way we were in school. See, he wore his tie, and then when we went to the office, he'd sit back there and said, "What did you do?" You know, the old thing way back in the 40s. And Mr. Maher, we appreciate very much your taking the time and consenting to be with us. And
very happy to be here.
we wanted to do this last fall, and I missed him by 3 days. You had just left for Florida, his home in the South. All right, we're talking here. We're in the Knights of Columbus building, and we thank the Knights for the use of their premises so we can just sit at this nice table and go over some old yearbooks, some old dates. And first of all, what we want to ask, of course, is a little bit about Dan Maher, where he was brought up, and a little bit about your early life.
Okay. I was born in a little town called Ovid. It's down near Geneva in the Finger Lakes section. And my father and mother, my grandparents, both came from Ireland. They settled in Rochester. And my father was a motorman on the trolleys in Rochester, and my mother and her sister ran a rooming house and boarding house. My father stayed there, and they got together, fell in love, and were married. And they lived in Rochester for a while, and then some friends of theirs had gone to this little town of Ovid, and they came back and told them how wonderful it was and so forth, and so they decided to visit. And they did visit, and eventually they bought a small farm. And then they moved to Ovid, and then later they bought the farm was about 60 acres, and then later he bought a larger farm a little bit further south of 360 acres. And I was the first one born on this new farm. But altogether, there were 11 in my family. There were 8. I have 8 sisters, or did have 8 sisters, and 2 brothers. And of the 11, 8 of us went on to some form of higher education. Whether it was teacher training or a business school or whatnot, 8 of us were able to go on. We were able to do that. These are the Depression years, 1935. Nobody had any money. The banks failed. And the only way we were able to go on was my father had a ruling. He didn't have that much money. He worked like a slave all his life and never accomplished that much. But anyway, he had a ruling with the people of his children that if you were working, you could stay at home, you wouldn't pay any board and room, but you would have to help with the education of those coming up who wanted an education. And that's the way it was. And I was able to go to college, Hobart College, because my sisters contributed, and I had a scholarship, and I worked, and I borrowed $1,300. That's the way I got through college.
Well, now, was this a dairy farm your father operated?
No, just a general farm. He did have, in the end, he did have a few cows, but
vegetables and things like that in that area?
Wheat and hay. And
so you worked in the fields?
Well, I didn't work that much at home. I wasn't a farmer.
You weren't a farmer?
I managed, and he didn't object too much to work for others and elsewhere. My 2 brothers did work at home, but I managed to work elsewhere.
You were the firstborn, you said?
No, I was the middle. I have one older brother, and one younger brother.
Okay. Now, is the right pronunciation of your name in Ireland too Maher, or was it
Yes.
Maher? No, it was
Well, it's Maher.
Maher. All right. And it's spelt the same way as it was there, M-A-H-E-R.
Yes.
All right. In high school, were you a good student?
I was a fair student.
Mm-hmm. Worked hard at the study? You
Yes.
didn't come easy like many of the others have to work for what they got?
No, it didn't come easy.
Mm-hmm. Play sports?
Yes, I did. In high school, of course, we had basketball, baseball, track, and then I fooled around with boxing in high school.
Was Ovid big enough to have a school of its own?
Yes.
How big of a community was it?
It was about the size of Champlain.
Well, you feel right at home here then. God, you're right in the area. And you did some boxing.
Yes, I did. I did some. They had the equipment there in the school. They had the punching bags and the striking bags and gloves, and I used to fool around.
Mm-hmm. Now, Hobart College is where?
Geneva.
In Geneva, New York. That isn't too far from where you were living then.
No, it wasn't. It was about 30 miles.
Were you staying home at the time you were going to school? Or did you
No.
stay right on the campus?
No,
You stayed
I
on
stayed
campus.
on campus.
Okay. So you ended up with a debt of $1,300 by the time you got out of school. You had to pay off, which is over a year's pay, right?
That's
At
right.
that time, more
At
than
that
sure was.
That's right.
So when someone said today, you know, they owe $20,000 out of college, it's about the same as you owed.
That is
About a
correct.
year when you start, you know, teaching, whatever.
That's correct.
And you didn't have to pay the income taxes then either, of course. They weren't.
Not really. The income tax was very small, and what I earned.
Yeah. Don't you wish you could have paid income tax during that time? That you'd have made enough.
If I'd made enough, I'd have paid them gladly.
You know, I used to say that if I ever earn enough to pay, I'll pay it gladly. It don't work that way when you work up to that salary. Have you noticed that? All right. Now, so 4 years, and you majored in teaching. You were come out as
No,
a.
I did not.
Oh.
The government had a V5 program, naval program, and this was what I was going to do. Even in my senior year at college, I was planned on this naval V5 program, which was a program whereby you were sent to school in Pensacola, Florida, and you were trained as a fighter pilot. And I had passed all the necessary exams and so on and so forth. And the only thing I had left was a physical. And about April or May of my senior year in college, I was called to New York for a physical. I went down. My sister took me down, and I went through the whole examination. It came to my eyes, and they said, "Well, you have stigmatism. One eye is stronger than the other. We can't take you in the program." So here it is, April or May of my junior year, or senior year in college, and nothing else planned and so forth. Fortunately, I had enough education courses to qualify as a teacher, but I never dreamed that I was going to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed up with the Interstate Teachers Agency in Rochester, New York. And one weekend, shortly after that, one Saturday night, there was a call. My sister took the call. I wasn't home. And there was a man by the name of Jim Cotting, who was principal of the school in Champlain. And he wanted to see me Monday morning. And so she said yes, I would be there. And when I got home, she told me about it. We didn't know where Champlain was. We looked it up on the map. And early Monday morning we left. We came to Champlain.
Let's stop you right there. We'll take a short break and come right back. Just give Calvin a little break here, and we'll find out how he found Champlain, New York. Okay, we're back, and we're talking, of course, with Daniel Maher from Champlain, New York. And you were mentioning how you got to Champlain, but before, and you talked about astigmatism, and I just mentioned off camera, I never saw you with glasses.
Well, I do wear glasses now for reading, but an interesting thing is that when I started teaching in Champlain, I wore glasses for reading and so forth, and most of the time in the classroom, sometimes in the classroom. But anyway, the school burned, my glasses burned, and I didn't wear glasses I didn't get a new pair of glasses for the next 10 years.
All right. We were just to a point where, well, first of all, my question would be, how did Jim Cotting know about Dan Maher in Ovid,
Well,
New York?
This is the way it works. If I'm looking for a teacher, I contact the teacher's agency, and they send me a list of candidates. And if I'm interested in any one particular candidate, then I call them, and they send me the folder.
I see.
So he evidently had contacted the Interstate Teachers Agency in Rochester. Of course, there are thousands of people looking for jobs.
Yes.
And they sent folders to him, and he decided that I was the one to have.
How complete is that file they would send on you?
Well, it was complete. All my marks and all the recommendations and so on and so forth were in that permanent folder.
And you wouldn't know this is happening at the time?
No.
No, you don't know where it's gone?
No, I never see well, I did see the permanent folder after I became principal. I went to the file, and there it was. But no, it's a permanent folder. It contains all your records, college records and recommendations and so on and so forth.
Okay. So you got to be here for the next Monday or Tuesday, you said, when you got the word?
When I got the word. So we...
You had no car?
I didn't have any car. And so my sister, again, brought me to Champlain. And we got here, I think it was early in the afternoon. But anyway, I met with Mr. Cotting. And I had a long talk with him, went through the building, met the other teachers. Evidently, he liked what he saw because he took me out and introduced me to the members of the Board of Education. Took me up to the customs and introduced me to a few people up there. And then we came back to the office. And he told me, he said, well, okay, I'm ready to offer you a contract for $1,000 a year. And he said, you'll be teaching American history, European history, and ancient history. That's social studies now, but that's what it was then. And you'll be teaching typewriting, business law, business arithmetic, general science, teaching every period of the day. So I said, fine. And he said, there's a place right across the road here, Will McRae. Do you know where that place is? So it's a house right next to where the old building was.
You mean on Elm Street right here?
Yeah.
The one across the street,
Yeah.
down the hill like a little bit?
No, it was up, it's where, it's across from the old Savoy.
Okay, yes.
Well, Will McRae and Miss McRae lived there, and she took in roomers and boarders. So I went over, and I got a room and board, and I forgot what the price was, but anyway, I was all set there. That's where I stayed when I started teaching with Will McRae.
Was that very early in the year? Do you remember? Was that like in the summertime?
That
That
was
he called you?
It was, I went up there in May.
Or in May, so for the following fall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you nervous going to that first?
Oh, of course I was. I was just a young boy. But you know, it's interesting. You talk about the folder. I didn't know this letter was in the folder. But anyway, I used to do boxing, or fool around with boxing in college, with the punching bag and striking bags and boxing each other and so forth. And one day, a friend of mine by the name of Joe Toulouse and I were boxing in the gym, and Joe got a little bit upset and mad and so forth, and he started throwing haymakers, and it turned into being quite a brawl. But anyway, Babe Krause, the director of athletics, was up in the balcony, and he was watching all this. And when it was over, he came down and he talked to me and wanted to know if I'd had any formal training and whether I intended to continue on and so on and so forth. But anyway, unbeknown to me, he wrote a letter about my ability as a boxer and so on and so forth, and put it in my folder. And of course that came to Champlain. And before I arrived in Champlain in September, everybody knew that there was a professional boxer. It kept growing and growing and growing. So people knew all about it before I arrived.
Well, you teach those older boys here, they better stay in line, I guess, when they hear all that news.
But that was just a Well, I didn't know it was happening. I didn't know he was up there in the balcony.
Yeah.
And,
A little thing like that could make a difference, maybe even in that, in. Now, tell us a little bit about Jim Cotting. Now, Jim Cotting, of course, we people know of him, but I didn't know him well. I met him, but didn't know him well.
Jim was a wonderful man. I learned a lot working under Jim from 1935 to 1940. A lot of things that I learned about teaching. And Jim helped me the first. I arrived here with no money, no friends, no car, no nothing. And Jim helped me along that line. But Jim was a wonderful man. I had a great deal of respect for him. And many things that we would meet after school and we'd go over these things. And one of the things that he told me that I always remembered and I always practiced was he said, don't forget to listen to the child. He said the child may be not entirely to blame. And that is true. I always made it a point to have the child tell his story. And I passed that on to Bud Moore. And Bud Moore followed the same.
Were there many male teachers when you came?
No.
Were you the only one?
There was Jim Cotting, myself, Peggy Delaney, Dorothy Dickiera, and Mary Linneo and Mrs. Minkler worked part-time. Mary Linneo was music and Mrs. Minkler was art. And they worked part-time, were shared, I think, with Rouse's Point. But those were the four or five people in the high school at that time.
If you look right here, this is our Alumni Association book that we had made with all of the graduates. And the top picture is the school that Mr. Maher is talking about. It was built in 1898, burned in 1940, and he came in 35. There's the picture. And tell us a little bit. Now, that was located where?
On, what is it, Elm Street?
On the corner of Elm and Prospect?
Right across from the Savoy.
Carl Friend lives there now.
That's right. That's right.
And this was the front facing that, it faced Elm Street. You were on Elm Street looking up at it. And it was a two-story, three-story building?
That was a three-story building.
And you had all the students in there?
Yeah, we had all the students, but there wasn't that many students.
Well, at that time, it was not a central school.
No.
Right? There were other schools around?
There were all these one-room schools. Perry's Mill School, which was up to the 6th grade, and we took the 7th and 8th. And, they had a one-room school in Dewey Cut and Cooperville and all over the place, yes.
There were 15 at one time in the town of Champlain, including Rouse's Point, Cooperville, and so forth, as I remember from an old map that I have seen. But most of them there were from the community within the village, mostly.
That's right. And they were transported in by Mr. Webb and his old Studebaker from Perry's Mills. That was the 7th and 8th grade.
Which Webb was that?
That was Harvey Webb's father.
Right. And I was talking with Harvey recently, and he told me, I asked him where his family was from, and apparently the Webb family at one time, either his father or grandfather, lived right across from Pauquette's house on the corner of Pine where Ashline lived. I forget his first name. I'm not prepared for that. Right across from the village hall. Wow. That corner was the Webb home years and years ago. And then they started a farm in Perry's Mills. And the Webb Dubois Road is named after the Webb family.
Yes.
So they brought in just a few students.
Few students. I think the first 6 grades were in Perry's Mills. They transported the rest.
Well, with 6 or 7 or 8 classes you were teaching, you did a lot of preparation during that time. First year teaching?
See, I had no time in school during the school day for any preparation. All the preparation that I did was done either after I got home at night or I got up early in the morning and did it. And all of them were different classes. I didn't have 4 classes of English or something like that. I had different classes.
Now, so that people didn't think that you didn't get enough money to eat and so forth, your $1,000 a year, you were able to sustain yourself pretty well at that time?
Yes, I was.
It wasn't starvation wages in no way. No. And you were also paying off your loan at the time?
That's right.
At the same time?
That's right, and then I didn't have any car when I got here. But when I arrived, as I said, I didn't have any car. I didn't know. The first family I met in Champlain was the Dodds. I met Mr. Dodds. Doug Dodds' father.
Father, yes.
And I met him at Dave Roberts' gas station or bowling alley on the corner.
Right opposite, right in the KSC room here, yes.
That's where I met him. And so I didn't know anyone, didn't have any money, didn't have any car. And I used to, sometimes I'd ride around with Dr. Allen, who was I'm the president of the Board of Education. I'd ride around with him on house calls. Bill Paquette, who was on the Board of Education. I knew I liked to hunt, and I hunted a lot with Bill. In fact, Bill, I hadn't been here too long, and he gave me a key to his camp. Told me to use it any time I wanted to. And so people were very, very friendly and very good. And,
now, I know from reading Old North Countrymen in the recent past here in the late 30s that you were quite a basketball player on the town team locally. So you must have been pretty good in high school, too.
I did. I was fairly good in high school, and I did well with the Border Hawks. Well, the Border Hawks, Jim McGowan.
That's the local team here in Champlain, yeah?
That's the local team in Champlain. He approached me about forming a town team. And so we said, fine. We had to get a manager, so we went over to see Cliff LaPlante in Champlain Laundry. And Cliff agreed to sponsor the team. He bought us uniforms. And
this is something else. He brought this here so that you people could see the uniform and Champlain Laundry. That was Clifford LaPlante Sr. and the orange and black. And you all had these, and your uniform was orange and black also?
That's right.
I think you mentioned on the way in there may not be too many of these still in existence.
I don't think there are any in existence.
I suppose you're going to will this back to the laundry here in the future. This ought to go in our local museum.
I'll sell it to Kenny.
You go, you get free laundry for a year or something. Look at this, Champlain Laundry. Great memories, and this should show people that, you should hold on to things like this. And now you've kept that all these years. You're talking 50 plus years here, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, but that, Cliff sponsored the team, and Jim McGowan, and Bert Robinson, Harold, Darcy, Coonan boys, Danny and Howard, and Stickney, Ken Stickney. I don't know. Do you remember any?
I remember those names you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know Stickney, but I remember the name, and I certainly knew the Coonans.
Coonans. And Stickney, Ken Stickney, myself, Moon LaValley.
Well, we know Moon. Moon's still around, of course.
Yeah, but those were some of the people that played on the team. Jim McGowan was the coach, I was the manager, Cliff LaPlante was the sponsor, and we had a good team.
Now, the question is, next big question is, where in the world did you play? You didn't have a gym at the high school.
No, we played upstairs in the village hall, all the home games.
That's down on the main street here, where the corner of Main and Church. Not too big either, was it?
But no one had a big gym at that time. Wherever place who played was the same thing, and of course there was a lot of close contact, a lot of pushing and shoving, and sometimes fist fights and so forth. But the rougher, the better. And we had a good fun. We played all over we played in Montreal. We played up in Dannemora Prison. We played in Plattsburgh. We played all over the place, and we usually were victorious. When you play Dannemora Prison, they don't have any return games. They don't ever come and play at your gym, do they? No. We played up there. But you had some good time. Met a lot of people that way, too. We had a lot of good following. With home games, the place was packed. Of course, it didn't take much to pack it. But
no. Did that help you at school because they know you're an all-around guy? Then I would think it would.
Yes, it did. It did help me. And I got acquainted with a lot of people. We had, Arson Trombley, Bill Paquette, Bill Roberts, were always at our games and so forth. And Bill, at that time, was president of the Board of Education, and they followed us all over.
So you did this for several years?
Well, not for several years, probably 2 or 3 years. And then, I don't know, it just disintegrated.
Well, you were getting older. Come on. you slowed down after a while. You make some good friendships. And back when I was playing, even in the 40s, when you played against another team, it wasn't a matter of calling him banana nose and all of this. You met somebody, and many times you became friends for life. Yeah, at least talking friend,
right.
you know?
It was good. It was very good.
And there was no school team at that time.
Yes, there was.
There was?
I
Did
was
they
the
also?
coach.
Oh, that was in addition to your 7 or 8 subjects?
I was the coach. I coached basketball, baseball, and track. And we had a school team, but I was not very successful as a coach.
You weren't. You're not blaming it on the players. You're blaming it on yourself as a
Blaming it on
coach.
myself. Of
Now,
course, it was new. They hadn't had a team, and the boys were inexperienced and so forth. But I don't think I did a good job as a coach.
were you a good disciplinarian?
Yes, I was.
Well, you were very sure about that. Yes, I remember you were. You didn't talk much. Your eyes could talk for you. You just look at us, and we're saying, "What is he thinking?" You know.
Well, if I couldn't handle it, I'd say, "Come on, get in the car. We're going home." Take them home to their parents, and I knew most of the parents.
Yeah. All right. Now, at that time, they were playing ball, outdoor ball. They were playing on what they call Nye Field, which
Yeah.
is where the school is now, right? Correct?
Yes.
Between
Yes.
there and the shop.
Yes.
I've been reading about that, and I didn't know where Nye Field was, and someone informed me that they let them use
That's
that
right.
area. All right, now we'll take another short break because we're going to get to an area here. We haven't talked much about his teaching. We're going to get into that a little bit now and find out how he became a principal. He became a principal a long, long time ago. He wasn't teaching too long before he became a principal. Be right back. Came to Champlain 1935, started teaching. How did your teaching go for the first 2-3 years?
Very good. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed working with the pupils. And I had some good boys and girls, good students, and I enjoyed it very much.
Did you work in the summertime? Did you go back to school? What happened in the summers?
Well, first couple of summers I went back home and I worked construction during the summer. And then I started going to summer school in Syracuse, working for my master's.
Mm-hmm.
And I did do that for, 5, 6, 7 summers. I did it the hard way to get my master's degree.
Now you became principal. Tell us how you became principal of the high school. You did that before the fire, right? You were principal in the old school.
No.
No?
Oh, when I was principal.
Yes.
First year
Yes.
I was principal.
Pardon?
The first year.
You came as principal?
No,
Oh, he
not
was
the
super.
first- I came as a teacher in
Yes.
1935.
35, yes.
And I taught until 1940. 1940, Jim Conning left, and we went to around Lake Placid. And the board hired me as principal in 1940.
For the fall of 40.
Yeah.
Before the fire.
That's right.
Okay.
And in December, the school burned.
Now, were you still teaching as principal?
Yes.
You didn't make it any easier.
Well, I wasn't. I was teaching 3 subjects: history, A, B, and C. So was Jim when he was principal. He was teaching all the science and math.
But they doubled your salary when you became principal.
Probably.
Did they?
Yeah.
Did they really? Oh,
Well, I don't know. I don't know what I got. Maybe 2,000. I don't know.
you don't remember that. All right. So then, I think it was in December that the school burned.
That's right.
I just recently saw, I had copied, made some copies of the fire, and then it burned in the middle of December of 1940, and they were getting ready for Christmas vacation anyway. And then, of course, the first of the year, you have to have place to. You had how many students? 200, 150,
About that,
right?
150.
What did you do with the students?
Well, we had to work quickly, make decisions quickly. So we rented the village hall, we rented the Grange Hall, we rented the Methodist Church. See, the Methodist Church, and the village hall, and the Grange Hall, and we fixed them up. I think we started a little bit late after Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's where we were for the next couple of years, in the village hall. My office was downstairs in the village hall. And I remember I was still teaching typing, and typing was up on the balcony.
Was your office where the village meetings used to be held later?
That's
Was
right.
that where it was?
And then we had the Grange, I don't know what grades we had, in the Grange Hall. And then we had the Methodist Church across the road.
Mm-hmm. As I recall, and I just had these up at our Village Fest, the first 4 grades, I don't think there was a kindergarten then, were in the Methodist church, and then I think it was 5, 6, 7, and 8, I think, were in the Grange, and then you had the high school in the village hall. As I remember it, I cut out the little clipping to put with some of my mementos, and haven't looked at it since, but I remember that something like that anyway. That was devastation,
Yes,
you know? Yeah.
it was, but it worked out.
Right. Now, at the same time as this happened, it was still a high school, there was talk in the community about a centralization. Can you give us a little bit about this? You must have been involved in that.
Yes, I was. There was talk of centralization, and of course, we were interested after the school. But some people accused me of burning the schools so we could centralize. But anyway, there was talk of centralization, and Board of Education were in favor of it. Money-wise, it was very favorable from the state, because the money we'd get from the state. And so we had to convince the outlying districts that this was the thing to do. We had meetings in all the districts, told them about centralization, how they'd be transported to the building, they'd have to close their schools, the buildings would be sold, and so forth. We did all of that. And I remember a meeting up in Clarence's district. I couldn't mention his name anyway, but I don't remember his name. But anyway, we had the meeting in the schoolhouse up there, the one-room schoolhouse. Dr. Allen was president of the board. And we got through explaining to the people everything about centralization and so forth. And this big man with a full beard and so forth, and his coat on, walked up through the aisle there, and he was announced that he opposed it. And he said that Maher and Allen were trying to lead the people, and he made quotes from the Bible. And he said that Maher and Allen, Dr. Allen, were trying to lead the people into the depths of hell with this centralization business and so forth. But anyway, we had a meeting, general meeting, over in St. Mary's Hall, St. Mary's Academy, and Nettie M. Ferriol was the superintendent at that time, and she spoke, and I had to speak, and of course the president of the board then, I don't know whether it was Bill Paquette, I guess, president of the board and so forth. But I got through explaining all about centralization and so forth, and I remember Monsignor Breau, who was pastor here at that time. He walked down through the aisle and stated that he was chairman of the opposition.
Oh, yeah.
And he spoke very nicely about why they shouldn't centralize. Well, anyway, the vote was the next day, and the people voted to centralize.
Prior to the centralization, each of these districts raised their own money within their own district alone.
That's right.
So that Calvin would have paid, and his father would have paid right next door where the school was, and I would have paid for the village. Because
That's right.
so it was different. Then later it was going to all go to a common pot.
That's right.
All right. We'll be right back. You're watching Hometown Cable, and our interesting guest today is Daniel Maher, the principal of, the only principal that Champlain High School ever had. I'm begging your pardon, Champlain Central ever had, because it merged into, with Rouse's Point, Mowers, and formed the Northeastern later on, and then he was principal during that time some, but the only principal that Champlain Central ever had.
I hadn't thought of that.
Oh yes, that don't get beyond me. Believe me, I know, and a good one. And when we come back, I want to talk and just see where the control lies between a principal, a superintendent of school, and the village, and the board, school board. How do they divide up the authorities, and who are the boss and over what? And we'll talk to you about that when we come back. Thanks for tuning in to Hometown Cable. As you know, we do talk off camera, and Calvin was saying maybe before we get into the board and the superintendent and principal and so forth, that someone ought to tell us a little bit about a rural school, the district schools. What were they made up of, and how many students, and how did it work?
Well, in the rural schools, when I started, I went to a rural school. And of course you had, in most of them you had grades 1 through 7. And the sixth graders would have their class in the front of the room, and the rest of us would study or listen. And the fifth grade would have their class, and so on and so forth. And there were advantages to that.
Maybe a total of 25, 28 kids in the whole school.
That's right. There were probably 25, 26. Yeah. And you would sit back there and listen, and you learn. You couldn't help but learn something. All the teaching was done, all the grades up there in front. And you sat back in your seat and listened, or studied, or whatnot. That was a great school.
And the same teacher taught all subjects?
Same teacher taught all subjects and all grades.
Mm-hmm. Was it hard to keep order of those who weren't in the class, the 4 or 5?
I don't think so. Usually they had the pot-bellied stove in the center of the room.
Mm-hmm. You got to remember that we have some very good teachers who taught this way. Now, I think Carl LaFountain taught in the rural school, not even during centralization. I think he taught over in Perry's Mills for a while.
Yes, he did.
The Dudley sisters, they taught, certainly.
Yes, they did.
You could probably think of some of the others when you came.
Gladys Kaufman and Hazel Webb, both taught in Perry's Mills. Lillian Fogier in Perry's Mills, or not in Cooperville. Those are the ones that come to mind right off.
And you've got to remember, this was not the easiest thing in the world to do either, and you started the fire in the morning. There wasn't a central heat. You got there and started in the wintertime, and I remember I started in a country school, and I never did learn to write well because we didn't have all the penmanship at that time, but I was always a very good math student because I liked math. And I made sure I listened to all 7th or 8th grades math, and I could do math 3 grades ahead of my class. Always could. And then I got into high school, and I had what I considered my best teacher ever was Paul Volgan. Not only was he a good administrator, I always said that it was a shame that Paul became an administrator. I think you can build an administrator easier than you can a good teacher.
Well, that's probably true.
You can be. There are more administrators, but he was a great teacher and the capacity to teach you. Now, you also taught me some business classes here. I think you...
Probably.
Typing. Did I have typing with you? I think I did. And could you type? I think you told me you couldn't type, but you could teach typing?
That's an interesting question. Now, of course, when I first met with Mr. Cotting and I took the job, he told me you teach typing. And I had never had typing in my life. So the first thing I did when I got back home, I bought an old typewriter, and I went to school and I got some books on typing, and I worked at it during the summer. And I came back and I taught typing for years. That's a regent subject, and I had good luck with it. But I never had formal training in typing at all.
Remember the first thing you learned to type? ASDFA? ASDFA.
JKL Semicolon.
Yeah, JKL Semicolon. And you always the next thing you wanted to type was your name. You wanted to be able to type your name fast, I remember. And it was the first class in the morning here I remember when I took it, and I have a finger that the tip is missing, and that was so stiff in the morning in the winter. It was half of the class before I could even get it to function, But way back, so country schools, they were a great thing, I think, for students at the time,
Yes, they were. Rural section. Then you couldn't help but learn from what was going on in the building.
And remember, at the time that they were in existence, there were no flush toilets in most cases. They were toilets out around the back.
You had the outhouse.
The outhouse around the back, and you had your bell that rang in the morning. And it was a different thing, and there were 15 in the town of Champlain. One right between the big cast iron farm and where Calvin lives now was the school was located. That was where that school was located, and there were a couple around Cooperville, and there was the Dewey Cut on the road there, 276. There was a school.
Kings
Bay, the old stone schoolhouse, and well, anyway, now it came the time, and you become principal in 1940, and something else happened in 1940. Several things happened in 1940 to Daniel Maher.
I got married to Benita Jefferson in 1940, and the school burned in December 1940.
And you became principal.
my first 6 months as principal.
Now, at the time you became principal, was there a superintendent of schools?
Yes, Nettie M. Ferriol. When I became principal, yes, Nettie M. Ferriol was superintendent.
What does that mean? What did it mean? What does a superintendent do? There's only one school? There was only one school?
No.
It hadn't centralized.
Well, it hadn't centralized, but the superintendent has charge of a number of schools. Like when Mrs. Ferriol was superintendent, she had charge of Champlain, Rouse's Point, Shazy, and probably Moores, that area. She was the supervisory district superintendent. And she was responsible for the 4 or 5 schools in her area. And
all right, personnel-wise or curriculum-wise?
Curriculum-wise, and she represented the state.
Was she your boss in any way?
She was my boss to a certain extent. To a certain extent. She didn't, she had nothing to say about hiring me, or she would probably not, in usual cases, have anything to say about firing me. But she was the one who worked with me on state reports, and I sent my reports to her, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Now, when you were hired as a teacher, the principal hired you. Mr. Cotting was the principal at the time.
Mr. Cotting hired me with the approval of
I'm
the
sorry,
Board of
yeah, he
Education.
recommended to the board
That's
that
right.
he would. So the principal recommends to the board, they hire someone.
That's right.
Today,
That,
when you...
that was in my day.
Okay. It's still your day. It's still your day.
Well, but today, most of them will set up a committee made up of board members and teachers and maybe parents, and they will interview the prospective candidates.
Okay. So then you answered at the principal in 1940 when you became principal, that until the school burned at least that time, you answered to the school board?
Yes.
And did you have to get them into everything, or did
No.
you had...
No. The school board established by state law, they establish policy. And they take care of problems that come up of a serious nature. And they represent the public. And but the main purpose is for them to establish policy, and then they say to me, this is the policy, you enforce it. You take care of it.
Okay.
And I would like to state now, the people who served on my Board of Education, through the years I was in service, all the years that I was principal here and the Central District and so forth, were wonderful people. They were the salt of the earth. I remember most all of them. They were good people.
Could every principal say that in other districts?
could not.
They could. All right. So it's not a common thing to what you just said.
No, I've known cases where the board would meet a principal on the street and fight with him. I've known cases that happened.
And you're not looking for a job on the school board or to be principal again, so you're saying this out of the goodness of your heart only, and you believe it.
I do.
Okay. That is nice.
I certainly was blessed with some of the finest people.
There aren't many people who can say they started their first job and ended their job within a 2-mile radius like you did.
That's right. That's true.
That's a long time. You retired in what year?
77.
70. That's 42 years.
Yeah.
In this system right here for our people. You can pretty much say you're a resident here now for sure. Champlain is in your blood for sure. You'd married Vanita Jefferson, and who was she?
Vanita Jefferson was a resident of Champlain. And she went to school in Champlain, and then she went to Clarkson at college, and then, well, of course, I had her in high school, and then when she went to college, I started going with her, and shortly afterward, we were married.
Who were her parents?
Emile Jefferson and Lorraine Jefferson.
Right, from downtown, they had the store right down here where Clinton Auto Parts is today.
That's
and they lived across the road, right straight across the road. Many years, several generations of the Jeffersons here in town.
Yeah.
And then you had children. How many children?
I have 5 children. 5 children.
Starting with the oldest, who are they? What they're doing now?
Okay.
Oh,
Sheila is the oldest. I'll guess at her age. She's probably 47, 48. But anyway, right now she is down in Naples, Florida. She is an RN, and before she went to Naples, she worked in Plattsburgh as a county nurse. She went to Florida, and she went down there as a supervisor of county nurses. Well, they're really not county nurses. They do the same job, but it's private enterprise. It's private enterprise. And she has a supervisory position, has 5 nurses under her in Naples. A very nice job, and is doing very well. She had 3 boys. The youngest boy, Danny, graduated from Vassar. He's in California, working for a doctor and doing research work. And he plans to go on and get his doctor's degree. John went to Paul Smith's, and he is down with Sheila in Naples. He's a chef at the Hilton. And Pat, he's out in Colorado, still going to school. So that's Sheila. And then there's Mary, who is the guidance director of the Northeastern Clinton Central School. Of course, she's married, lives in Champlain. She married Henry Van Acker. And there's Danny, who has been down in Virginia Beach for I don't know how many years. He went down there and he opened up a rental store, Taylor rental store, and he now is the owner and operator of this Taylor rental store and has done very, very well. And then Pat, who lives in Rouse's Point, is married. He's a custom inspector. And Sean, he's down in Marco Island, Florida, and he has his own business there. It's called Maher and Spiegel, and he started out clearing lots on Marco Island. When he first came down, they were thinking about passing an ordinance saying that all lots had to be cleared and they had to be kept cleared and so forth. So Sean bought himself a tractor and a bush hog. He started mowing lots. I worked for him for $6 an hour. And well, then he merged with another company, and they build houses, they build seawalls, they build docks, they build decks, they build walkways, and whatnot. And Sean is married and has 2 children.
we'll take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to hear more about Danny Jr. There's a story that you should hear. I think it's Danny Jr. that was in the Reader's Digest that many people here have seen, but I want to hear it from the father, the proud father of that story when we come back. We'll be right back. Thanks for watching Hometown Cable. Well, I told you I would ask you, Mr. Maher. That's the first time I told you. Tell us a little bit about this escapade. Nearly, it was a real good story about Danny.
Yeah, Danny's the one down in Virginia Beach, and well, he and a pal of his were coming home from Virginia Beach one night, about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and they went over this bridge and around the corner, and they noticed this car on fire that had gone off the bridge. And he immediately stopped and ran over, and this woman was screaming, my child, and so forth, is in the car. So Danny went over and he tried to open the doors, and he couldn't open the doors, so then he decided to try and get in the back window of the car. And eventually he smashed the window and crawled in. The car was on fire. He crawled in and he got the child and handed him out to his partner. And on the way away from the car, the gas tank exploded. And so the city fathers got a hold of it in Virginia Beach, and they had a dinner in his honor, and they gave him a plaque and so forth. And after it appeared in the Reader's Digest, contacted him, wanted to know what the story was and so forth, so they wrote a nice article in the Reader's Digest. he received a letter from the President of the United States. He was given the Carnegie Award, which was a large wall plaque and quite a large sum of money. And well, anyway, it was in all the newspapers, and he has quite a stack of letters that he received from people all over the United States after it appeared in the Reader's Digest. And he kept in touch with the people. They lived in the area.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, he kept in touch with the people. I don't know whether he still does or not, but for a time he still did, yes.
Was the little boy burned at all? Do you know? No, wasn't. So when you say the back window, you don't mean the side back window. You mean the very back over the trunk.
That's right.
The back end, and that's not easy to
That's
punch
the way
in.
he got in. It's the only way you get in. He couldn't open the doors.
Yeah. Now, Danny was probably the biggest of your three boys, and so it's not easy to go through that back window either. You know, I mean, I'm not going to go through the window. I mean, I don't mean he's big like that, but he's the bigger of the three people, right? And that took a lot. That takes a lot of.
It did.
You must be very, very proud, Mr. Maher, of that. I'm sure.
At first I didn't think too much of it, but then when the village fathers, the city fathers, and the Carnegie Award and so forth, well, yeah, I am very proud of it.
I'm sure you are. That was in the early '80s or late '70s, the early '80s, huh? Yeah. All right. So we've got your family. Now, did Vanita ever teach? When she got out, was she going to be a teacher when she went to Clarkson?
No, she had two, not Clarkson, but St. Lawrence.
Oh, okay, I beg your pardon.
St. Lawrence. But she had a year at St. Lawrence, and no, Vanita is very talented in art, painting. She did that for a long time. Now she's very much interested in sculpture work, stone sculpture. And she does a lot of that, and is very talented, and she has a number of pieces of her sculpture work on exhibit in the art gallery in Marco Island.
Okay, now we'll talk about Marco a little later. That's where you go in the wintertime. Now there came a time when the Mahers decided to, I guess, purchase a house on Oak Street. You remember when that was?
That was way back about 1940, in that area.
Not too long after you were married.
Yeah.
Now, whose home was that before?
Well, we bought it from Averill. We bought it from what's his name? Shazy.
Hubble. No.
He was a real estate agent.
Sweet.
He had bought it. Sweet.
Yes.
He'd been a real estate agent. He'd only owned it for a few years, but the house originally was Averill's, and the house dates back to about 1860.
The Averills, I think, were involved at Sheridan.
Yes.
Right. Yes, that's the Averill family.
Yeah.
And the Averills, there was another Jim Averill went to school when I was here at
Jimmy
way
and,
back.
James Averill, and he became associated with Sheridan.
Yep. Well,
And the other boy went to Naval Academy and graduated from there.
Mm-hmm. So you've lived all your married life right there on
Yes.
On Oak Street.
Yes, we have.
Beautiful home there on the. I guess that'd be on the east side of the. But it also comes a time that in the wintertime, you don't even wait till winter. Early fall. How long have you been going to Florida?
We've been going down there quite a while. Probably since I retired. We used to go down and we'd spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I'd say, well, that's enough of that. I'll go home. But then it got longer and longer and longer, and now, of course, we stay the winter months.
And you stay at Marco Island?
We have a small home on Marco Island, yes.
Can you tell us where Marco Island is?
Marco Island is on the west coast, over on the west coast, and it's 17 miles from Naples and about 60 miles from Fort Myers, south.
And you're just off the coast of the mainland.
That's right.
Marco Island. It got quite a bit of that storm a couple of years ago, didn't it?
Yes, it did. But the eye of the storm hit a little bit south of us, so we had about $2,000 worth of damage. And others, roofs and so forth, others had more damage, but not that much.
Of course, Mr. Maher is not the only one from the area on Marco Island either. First of all, one of your sons is there, you mentioned. right?
Ron,
And there's also the Caseys from around this point.
Casey, Bob Maher, and 3 or 4 people from Plattsburgh.
So you still get a chance to play cards or go out to dinner with these people that you
Yes,
that you have.
they're all within a few minutes walking distance.
Hmm. Your health is good,
Yes.
and we see you out there. I saw him one day. I stopped last year to talk to him, see whether he would talk with us, and he was working on his stone fence. He was a mason that day, and the last time I stopped up, I think you were a painter in your back porch. So
Yeah.
you do keep active.
Jack of all trades. I do keep active, yes.
All right.
But it takes me sometimes I get very angry with myself because it takes me forever to finish a project that I used to do in an hour, now it takes me a day.
Does it take you longer to go to the post office than it used to? I find myself meeting somebody and talking down there. Does that happen to you quite a bit?
I do the same thing.
Of course, someone like yourself, that nearly everyone in this area, except for people who moved in, were your students.
That's right.
You know?
I meet a number of them in the post office, yes.
Can you remember their names? That's the hard part.
Fortunately, I can.
That's great when you can.
Fortunately, I can. Maybe it'll take a few minutes for it to get there, but usually I do.
Mm-hmm. That was a good move that first day you came up to Champlain, New York in 1935 to see about this job. You didn't know where it was. How did you find out where it was?
Well, we looked at the map, got out a map, and found Champlain. I didn't ever know where Champlain, never heard of it. But we found a map, and my sister drove up.
You know, when we had our Alumni Association meeting in 1990, the first one ever, of course, the number one person there was Dan Maher. And he gave a little talk, and he talked about, one of the things he talked about that was never shown on TV, and if you don't have a copy of Calvin doing that, and there's over 200 people are identified in that tape, and it's still available, I think, if you ever want to see a copy of all these people, check with Calvin. But I remember you were talking about the boxing you used to do downstairs in the old school. Tell us the story about the boxing, and they thought you were a pro when you came, you said.
That's true. Word spread rapidly. But anyway, when I came, I was interested in boxing, and the only thing that they didn't have many athletic events going on at the time in the school. There was basketball and baseball, track. Well, I introduced track, and I introduced cross country. And well, anyway, I was interested in boxing, and there was a little interest in boxing in the area because of the old barracks. Every Saturday night they had matches down there, and people used to go down, myself included. A bunch of us go down on Saturday night and watch the matches. But anyway, Jim Conning was very helpful. He bought me a punching bag, and he bought me a striking bag. He bought gloves and the equipment that was needed for a little boxing program. And of course, we had no place. There was no gym or anything, but the boys' basement, there was quite a bit of room down there. So we set up a punching bag down there, and we set up a striking bag, and we used to go down every single night after school there for a while. We'd have a bunch of boys down there boxing and fooling around and so forth. And well, that's the way it started. And then one summer, I don't know, it was 36 or what, but anyway, one summer, there was I think it was the 4th of July celebration, and John Craig, remember John Craig?
Mm-hmm.
And myself, we built a ring on Main Street, and we had boxing matches. And some of our boys participated, some of my boys in school, Oral Parsons, Donald Roberts, some of the other boys participated in these boxing matches, and there were boys from Canada that came over and boxed as a form of entertainment for this 4th of July celebration. We did that for, I don't know, 1 or 2 years. But it proved that they were very interested, and of course, all of the bigger boys were interested in becoming heroes and knocking the pro out and knocking him down and so forth, but they never quite succeeded, although a young boy at the time by the name of Oral Parsons, he never knew it, and I never told him. But we were boxing, and Oral hit me in the chest, knocked the wind out of me, where I had to back up and regain my leap for a while. I didn't know what was going to happen, but he could have been the hero.
I think that you said at the meeting, if he'd have followed up right then, he'd have been the hero of Champlain. And I thought that was just great because it showed I didn't know you were involved in that 1936 is the time that they had all this boxing in the old village hall. And I knew John Craig was involved, and Bert Schneider, who was the referee, the Canadian Olympic champion. He was here as a border patrolman. But you were involved in that too. Yeah, there were fights. Plute Manette was one. The Gregoires. There were a couple of them.
White, what's Bosco White or
Redwood and Bosco both. Bob Perry from Moore's, and all of these people. We've shown those on TV, and also some of the Junos were fighting and so forth. But you didn't fight in any of those yourself. I didn't see your name in any of those. But you were too smart to get involved in that.
That's right. Same like the boys would say, well, my father wants to come in and box with you, or the hired man wants to come in and box with you. Well, I had nothing to gain by boxing the father.
That's right. All right. We'll take another short break and come right back, and we're going to talk about the problems of opening up a brand new building, and also not only a new building but a whole new system, centralization. In about 1942 when you went to the new building. Thank you for tuning in to Hometown Cable. And this type of program is on every Sunday. And then during the week, of course, Calvin's bringing you and Sam all the local sports in the area and many of the meetings in the area and other important events. And they can't do that only on the little advertising expenses they charge. Why don't you become a patron of Hometown Cable by just sending your $12 or more to 1477 Ridge Road and become a patron and say, yes, I do like Hometown Cable. I watch it. I also help to finance it because someone has to finance it. That's all we're going to say about that today, but stay tuned. We'll be right back with this legend of Champlain, Daniel Maher. I think we've covered up until about 1940. The school has burned. We know about your family. And now there came the very important part, at least to me, because in 1942, this school opened up here on Elm Street, right here, the new building. I was fortunate to come to school here in 1944, in the fall of 44, until 46 when I graduated under the tutelage of Mr. Maher. And this school only opened in 42, 2 years before I came. And I often wondered now, what input does a principal, if any, have in what the school is going to look like? Were you instrumental in not the size of the gym, whether you're going to have a gym, where the office should be and things like that? Were you instrumental?
Well, yes, I was. Any principal would be. We give the architect we have meetings with the architect and the board, of course, and we tell them what we want, whether we want shop or agriculture or music and so on and so forth. And of course certain things are mandated. And the architect takes our thoughts, including that of the Board of Education and myself, and he draws up his plans according to that, according to what we've told him.
Okay. We've got a battery problem. Just be right back. Hometown Cable, but we're back now. Batteries fixed and all our problems. Now, okay, now you were talking that you get very involved as a principal. We sometimes forget that, I think, that you would be involved in something like that, you know?
No, we get very involved in it. And, of course, the Board of Education, they have many, many meetings with us discussing buildings and plans and so on and so forth before we pass this information on to the architect. And then there are state rules and regulations that you have to follow relative to, well, one of the interesting things is when the new building was built out on 76 there, you had to have so much window space by law in each room. Now, of course, that has all changed, and they've covered up half the windows in the building.
Now, let's face it, a school board member many times is a good guy. He's a businessman. He knows a lot of people, so he's elected. But he doesn't know an awful lot about education of children, basically.
Well, of course, he doesn't become involved that much in the actual education of the child. They establish a policy that every child is guaranteed education to this extent and so on and so forth. And it's up to the teachers and the principal to see that that policy is
And
carried
building
into
the
effect.
school probably the same way. You know, they
Building
need
the
some
school
direction.
the same way, you know. We have, building a school, you have a clerk of the works. And he is present at every board meeting. And he tells the board what has been accomplished, what needs to be done. If there's any fault to find, he's the one that tells the board about it and so on and so forth. He's the building contractor. He's the one who has close contact with the contractor.
Now, let's think now, you know, when I was building, my house was going up or anything else I have, every night I'd go up and just see what has happened during the day because I'm interested and want to see every... Now, here's a man who's not 30 years old yet, who had three big things happen to him in 1940. He got married, he became principal, his school burned, and now he's got a brand new school he's going to go to, the newest in the whole county, and you're not 30 years old yet, right?
That's right.
You're not 30 years old yet, not even close probably, and you're going to move into this. And were you up there every night looking around and say, well, that's going to be my office, and that's a nice gym, and did you go through there like that?
Well, yes, I was up there quite often. Very proud of the building. It was a new building, very well built. And I was up there whenever I had free time, figuring out what would go here and what would go there, and how we would do this, and so on and so forth. For example, in that building, in the present elementary building, we built a room for agriculture, but we never were able to introduce that, and so we used it for something else because you had to be used for something else.
You know, it amazes me that Champlain, in the middle of some of the best farmland in the county or in northern New York, doesn't have an ag program. And I'm talking about an ag program like Northern Adirondack has a great one. Of course, our teacher is one of our residents right here, you know, Mr. Bushy. And it never really got off the ground here at Champlain.
And the board has discussed it at various times. And as I said, in this building there was a room for agriculture. But when we got time to move in and so forth, we had to use it for something else.
When you opened in 1942, you were centralized at that time.
Yes.
Did all the other schools come in that first opening of the school?
Perry's Mill stayed open. That was the one school that stayed open, I think first 6 grades. All the other schools closed and were transported into the new building.
So where you had before 5 or 6 teachers, you now had double that?
Yes.
All added responsibilities for you, and just not only responsibilities, but a lot of problems getting started with something that size.
Yes, that's true. But we were so happy to move out of the mess we were in.
Oh yeah, 3 different buildings. It had to be something else.
We were happy to get in there, but it worked out very well, went smoothly.
Now, when the class we honored at the 50 years, of course, in 1990 when we had our reunion, was the class of 1940. One of the bigger classes I think we've ever had, and one of the most active classes. And I think at the time they were all there except one at our reunion. 1940 class was a good class.
Yeah.
Now, this is as good a time as any, I guess, because I've had some contact with Bud LaPlante, and something happened with somebody from the class of 1940, whether we mention names or not, I don't know, that's up to you. But something was done between that person and Hobart and you. It's a great honor to you, and do you care to talk about that?
Yes, I would be very happy to talk about it.
Okay. I can mention it, or why don't you tell us the story? Why don't you tell us the story?
Well, is it okay to mention names?
I don't know. I guess so. I don't know. I don't know what the story is. I guess so. I don't know why it wouldn't be. We won't necessarily mention the amount of money if you don't want. We maybe not, because I don't know.
Well,
I really don't know.
Anyway,
it's public. It will be.
It will be, yeah.
All right.
But in December 20th, 1993, I received this letter from the college.
Hobart.
Hobart.
Yep.
Want to read it?
Yes. Mr. Daniel Maher, December, a year ago, it is with great pleasure that I share the news that Dr. Willis A. Adcock, class of 41, has made a very generous gift to Hobart College to establish a scholarship in your name. Congratulations. Now, Dr. Adcock, 41, was he the class of 41 or the class of 40?
41.
Here, class of 41?
Yeah.
Okay. Willis has great appreciation for Champlain, the education he received there, and your positive influence in his life. I can think of no higher compliment to a teacher than for a student to honor him in the way that Willis has chosen to honor you. I know that you, as we, are moved by Willis's thoughtfulness. We expect to name the first of generations of Daniel E. Maher scholars later this year. Each scholar will continue the legacy begun by you and carried on by Willis Adcock. Thank you for all that you have contributed to the lives of so many and for encouraging Willis to attend Hobart College. It is fitting that this most distinguished of our alumni should say thank you to us and to you by establishing the Daniel E. Maher Class of 35 Scholarship. Sincerely, Richard Hirsch, President of Hobart and William Smith Colleges. Now, William Smith is the ladies, the two adjoining colleges?
It's all one now. But at that time, William Smith was the ladies, female, and Hobart was the male.
Mr. Maher, as we know, graduated in there, and then Willis Adcock went on and graduated also. And he was his family from Champlain very long, Mr. Maher?
No. Willis came from Canada, and he stayed with Charlie White. Oh, I don't know. Do you remember Charlie White?
No.
Lived up by the border on.
That's what they call White's Corners, I guess.
Yes,
They've been known as. Okay.
But he had a small farm up there, and I think maybe he might have been a custom officer or immigration officer. But he stayed with Charlie White, who I think, not sure, was a relative. And the only other people that Willis was familiar with in the village was the Blair Hogs. But he came from Canada, and of course then I was teaching and I had him in class. A brilliant, brilliant, brilliant boy. But an all-around boy. He played sports and was getting in trouble once in a while, and he was a real all-around boy. But anyway, he graduated from high school, and then he had a scholarship to Hobart. And I remember the day he left Champlain, went to Hobart, and I remember Willis coming back, I don't know, one of his vacation periods, and telling me that he was pumping gas, he was waiting on table at a fraternity house, and he was putting money in the bank. And so he graduated from Hobart, and then he went on to Brown University on a fellowship. And from Brown University, he went to work. And I'm sure he got his doctorate from Brown. Mm-hmm. And then he became vice president of the Texas Instruments. He went to work for Texas Instruments. Became vice president of Texas Instruments. Became involved in the development of the chip. And I don't know whether Willis was the first to introduce it or whether he was simply involved in it or what, I do not know. But he became involved in the chip, and his work was so well known that the college bestowed upon Willis the highest honor that they could give to any alumni. And a group of the people from Hobart College went to Austin and bestowed that honor upon him in Austin. And then he retired from Texas Instruments and became chairman of the science department of Texas University. He taught chemistry. And then he retired. He's fully retired now, but he still has an office at the university.
Graduate of our own Champlain Central School. He was here in 1990. I think he was president of his senior class, as I recall.
Yes.
And Bud LaPlante, Clifford LaPlante Jr., from the Laundry, is now a resident in Austin, Texas, and does see Willis from time to time, goes to lunch with him and so forth. And he advised me some time ago of this substantial donation, contribution to Hobart College in the name of Daniel Maher, and you should be very proud, and we're very proud of you for that.
I am very honored.
Should be. We'll take a short break. Come right back to you. You're watching Hometown Cable. Anything else you want to? I'm sorry, well, you were still talking about it. You want to talk any more about that? You said you were honored, and what else?
Well, it was the nicest present. This came shortly right after Christmas, and it was the nicest Christmas present I ever received. Well, for me, it gives me a great feeling to think that because of something that I did, or that I had some influence on somebody to do this so that somebody else can get an education, that means a lot to me.
I'm sure that you had something to do with his attending Hobart to start with.
Yes, I did.
That's it. And also Marshall Maynard at Hobart also.
Yes.
And others probably that I don't know, but I know of those two
Buddy
people.
LaPlante.
Buddy LaPlante of Hobart, I should have known that. I knew that, yes, Bud LaPlante. Yeah, Bud was here over the last weekend, and he called me around 12:30, so I'm going to be up to see you in about an hour. He said, I got to go over and see Dan Maher for half an hour or so. Well, I think he was at your place more than a half hour because
most of the afternoon.
Most of the afternoon.
Buddy always drops in.
Yep.
And he calls quite frequently. Even when we're in Florida,
yes,
he calls
does.
quite frequently.
Bud and I and one other boy, Bob Levine, who's the sheriff of Essex County, were the male members of the class of 1946 with this man as our principal and our mentor. And one of there were only three of us that I remember who, when we have political meetings in school that could say we were Democrats. I think you and Bottle and I think, were the only three. I think the Watson girl, Martha Watson, I think she also identified herself at the time as a Democrat. We were really outnumbered, weren't we? All right, we'll be right back now. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're really hitting all angles here of this gentleman in 60 years next year in our community. And Mr. Vogan, already 60 years over there. That's 120 years of these educators, and still influencing the students. Even after retired for 17 years, he's still got an influence on one Willis Adcock, who remembers this man and has established a scholarship, and I think that's just tremendous. It means your name will be on for many, many years after we're all gone, You'll remember that Daniel E. Maher and what he's doing for more scholars and more principals and more teachers and more whatever. They don't have to be teachers to be part of that scholarship. We'll be right back. Okay, the picture you see, is it frozen in? Frozen in there is Willis Adcock, who was class president in his senior year, class play, Glee Club, Student Council 2 to 4, Reflector editor in his junior year, Journalism Club in his senior year, Soccer senior year, Basketball third and fourth year, and Baseball fourth year. And by the way, I was correct. I think the letter is wrong for some reason. He did graduate in 1940. This is a 1940 yearbook. And not only was his picture in this yearbook, but here's the man that got him to go to and helped him get that scholarship, Daniel Maher, in 1940.
What kind of lipstick was he wearing?
Yeah, they put him. They really made an impression on your lips here. And but now that's Dan Maher, and there he is right here, just a few years later.
A few years
A few years later. Now, another thing, another picture we should show you, because he happened to have it here. Dr. Allen, who was the president of the board.
He was president of the board when I was hired.
Meant an awful lot to Mr. Maher. All right. And he was our local doctor here for many years.
That's right.
Used to live up on
Oak Street,
just past the Presbyterian Church. And then one other that meant a lot to Mr. Maher, the president of the board, of course, couldn't have done anything without the recommendation of this man right here, Jim Cotting.
That's right.
Who later came back and was your superintendent of...
That is correct.
How did that happen? Can you tell us a little bit about that at all?
Yes, of course, Jim, that was a promotion for Jim. He went down Lake Placid area and down there for a while, and then he came back as superintendent.
Now, when he was superintendent here, he was superintendent of Chazy and the other area too, or just here?
No, he had Chazy, Moores, Beekman.
Okay.
Let's see. No, it'd be Chazy, Moores, Champlain, Rouse's Point.
These are the old yearbooks, and one thing about the older yearbooks, these were mostly printed, I believe, by McClellan, and he didn't have the facilities to print the pictures. So the pictures were done by Mr. Stone, and then we glued all the pictures into the books. Because we didn't sell them by the hundreds, but they were all glued. Even in 1946, when in our yearbook, they were still being glued into the books. Many of these books are on display. They're in the back room at our local library here in Champlain. This particular book belongs to Mr. Maher. This is 1940, I believe. I'll get...
My uncle's in that picture.
Which picture? Well, wait a minute. Here he is. Which one?
Second from the right in the back.
All right.
Who is it?
Ronald.
That's Ronald Castine
Oh.
in that picture. So this must have been the junior class or sophomore class. I'm not sure. It fell out of whatever page it was. He can put that back after. I think it was a junior in that year. And I'll put these right here, Mr. Marshall. You can put those. They'll have to be glued back in.
Right there. Your book right there.
This one?
Yep, right where that is.
Yes. You want this one?
Yeah, basketball team.
Oh, look at this basketball team right here. There's a powerful basketball team. We're going to freeze this picture in, and I'll let my principal look at this, and he can identify these people in this picture.
Shot here. We got them.
You recognize anybody in that picture, Mr. Mark? Can you read those off, starting with the top left?
Gotta get my
You
glass.
got to get your glasses. I think they're in the outside pocket here. Now we're going to see
I don't know if I recognize. What year is this?
This 1946. Top left is Kermit Craig.
Yeah.
And then the next one is a Hobart graduate.
Is that Maynard?
Yep, that's Marshall Maynard.
And
John Craig's boy,
the older boy.
Vernon. No, that's Vernon. That's
Vernon, yeah.
Vernon.
And that's Boucher.
Boucher, George Boucher.
Harry Roussac.
Harry Roussac.
I don't know who that is.
That's this guy right here. That's Bob Venn right there in the lower left.
That's Bob
That's
Venn.
Bob Venn 50 years ago. 40.
He had black hair.
Well, yes. Well, it was a lot darker than it. Well, you're not in that picture because you did too.
And who is this?
Dave Southwick.
I thought it was.
David.
LaPlante.
There's Bud LaPlante.
And,
The other senior member of our class.
yeah, what's his name?
The Democratic Bottle Levine.
Bottle Levine, Kenny LaPlante.
Kenny LaPlante.
And Morris Racine.
No, that's Dwayne Bayshard.
Is that Dwayne?
That looks like Dwayne to me.
Yeah.
Yep, that's Dwayne Bayshard. And I don't know what we did that year. We won a few. We didn't win them all. Couldn't beat Altona. They beat us 73-24. And they beat us next time 63-37.
Harry Roussac, he was a good coach.
But yes, but we had fun. We enjoyed ourselves in our games, and this is my. And by the way, the other night I was over to Wendell and Emily Castine in Chazy, New York, and she told me they'd had a book sale the Saturday before, and I hadn't attended. I was over at the Shazy Field for the St. Joseph's picnic, and she gave me 2 yearbooks
Oh, did she?
that were at the at their book sale, and one of them happened to be 1946, which couldn't be better. It was another book of mine. This is it here, as a matter of fact. I put my name in the front of it here. This was the one she gave me, and I thank her for that. And it was also in 1944 that I didn't have, so now I got a couple extra. Okay, let's see. One other thing we have here that we bring up. 1977 Citizen of the Year, Daniel E. Maher, in appreciation for your many years of dedicated service to this community, Rouse's Point, Champlain Chamber of Commerce. Now, I mentioned this when I was talking with Lucille Zarneski. There's something very unique about these three people who are sitting right here carrying on this conversation, you and I, and the camera. You know what that is?
Yes, I do.
Well, tell us
We're all members of the same
We're
organization.
all members of that same. We're all Citizens of the Year. But the leader right here, back in 1977, Daniel Maher, the year that you retired.
Yeah.
And then the year I retired, 1988, and Calvin Castan, I guess, in 1991, Calvin?
I was the first. I started it.
You started it. And, well, I'll tell you, it's a great honor. It's very nice.
It is.
I'm sure I know I appreciate it, and Calvin did, and we didn't get into the things that we did, volunteering and so forth. We don't intend to put in the class of your many years, and we didn't affect as many lives as you did. You scared a lot of people when you were principal. None of us wanted to go to the principal's office, you know. Even though we could go and see Orva Hamill when back there when I was going to school.
Well, it's only natural, I guess, to be a little bit afraid of the principal. But, I had a lot of kids that would come in. I'd come back to the office and somebody would be sitting in my chair. And got along good.
Well, things have changed a lot in education and in size. You were fortunate, I think, to... it was pretty like a family when I went to school here. You know, we're talking maybe 50 people in high school, maybe, you know? Yeah. And you knew them like your own children.
And I knew their family. I
knew
knew
their
father,
family.
I knew
Yes.
the mother, and I
Yes.
knew the whole works.
Today you don't have that. You don't have that at all. And I really personally believe that even though there may be, quote unquote, a better education or more diversified, I think there's a little bit lost in that much of they're getting too sizable for my estimation.
Well, I enjoyed that period of my life was when I knew all the parents, I knew the kids, I knew the children, and the parents would say to me, Dan, you take care of them. Whatever you do is okay with me. But then you gradually reached a point when I retired, the feeling was, don't touch my child.
Oh, yes.
I'll take care of my child myself. Yep. Don't you touch him.
Even more so today. The teacher today don't dare come over and talk to Susie and put his hand on her shoulder. He could be in trouble.
That's right.
You know, they're going to get him for harassment and the rest of the things, you know. Now, one of the other books I brought was one that was donated, I guess, to the library by Ed Dodds, a teacher at our school for...
Wonderful guy. Taught business.
Okay. How long did he teach at?
Oh, Ed was with me for 20 years.
Yep. Lived in Shazy, and here's the graduation baccalaureate services in June 17, 1956, which I think was the last time that Champlain Central, as we know it, had a graduation. In 57, he went up to the other school, or you merged, rather. Rouse's Point and Champlain became a joint classes, but they were in separate buildings.
That's right.
What kind of problems did that bring to you in 1957?
Well, with the merger of Rouse's Point, of course, financially, it was to our advantage and definitely to the advantage of the Union Free School District, Rouse's Point, to merge with the Central District. There were incentives offered by the State Department which encouraged you to grow larger and to take in a Union Free School District. So financially, it was to our advantage in both cases. Educationally, it was better. We had more students, we could offer more classes and do more things. There's no question, well, we had a better educational program. It was difficult. The people of Rouse's Point and Champlain were quite bitter. Some of them were quite bitter about, I don't know why, if you were Rouse's Pointer or if you were a Champlainer, it didn't get along. In fact, at one time, we had to quit playing interscholastic athletics with Rouse's Point because of the hostility.
Before 1957?
Yes.
Yes.
And that was the feeling. And when we started discussing this thing, there were people on my Board of Education who were, one person in particular was very much opposed to it. He wanted no part of it. He wouldn't even attend the meetings. But anyway, we got around to the point where we said, okay, we're going to take in Rouse's Point, become part of the Central District. And of course, it was up to the State Department and so on and so forth, and the vote of the people. And we annexed Rouse's Point to the Central District. And it was difficult for a while because of the feeling that existed between the two villages, but it worked out. You had to be careful. If you were from Rouse's Point and you got an honor of some kind, maybe we could find somebody from Champlain who would get something else that would kind of equal the thing up. And that had to go, you had to be careful. But it worked out, and it was the best thing that ever happened as far as Champlain and Rouse's Point is concerned. And today, no one even thinks about it. It's all one.
Yes.
And it was the best thing that ever happened.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, and we're going to take a break. But before we do, you mentioned Rouse's Point Union Free School. Well, they weren't within the centralized system up until then. What does a Union Free School mean?
Well, they were a separate district, like
Just within the village of Rouse's Point.
Yes, we were a union-free school until we centralized.
Mm-hmm.
But then Rouse's Point was a separate district. And financially, they had to come into the Central District, or else pay higher taxes.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a good move, and anyone today living in Rouse's Point or Champlain will say that it was good.
Okay, we'll be right back, and we're going to talk more about this merger and the problems that took place, because you were operating in two different buildings, and that doesn't help to make cohesion at all for those first couple of years.
No.
Please stay tuned, and we're talking with Daniel Maher, the principal, superintendent of school, superintendent? Supervising,
ended up as
superintendent of schools for the area, and now retired, and he doesn't know whether he likes it up north or south because he goes to both places, but he knows he likes Marco. We'll be right back. As I sit here, and we're going to get back into this this period of 57, 58 with the Rouse's Point merger, but there's one thing I should bring up, one person I should bring up, because I don't know the story, but meant so much to me and everybody who attended Champlain Central. And that's a lady by the name of Frances St. Maxence. How did she get involved in our school, and how much she did, and never got a penny? She was not an employee of our school, played all the music. How did that come about, Mr. Maher?
Well, Frances is a wonderful person. She's one of the most outstanding citizens, people that I've ever known. But she was involved in the school when I came. She was playing the piano for rehearsals and so forth. And that just continued. It was volunteer work on her part. She was up there every day. She was part of the faculty with no pay. And she played for all the Christmas programs and so forth. Just a wonderful, wonderful person.
And I tell you, all the games, she was there for everything, and just was so outgoing. And I always felt to her as one of the faculties. When we had our reunion back in 1990, we had two honored guests who had not graduated from our school. Well, we had three. Of course, he was our principal. He was like a teacher. That's why Mr. Maher was there. But there were two people who had never graduated there, and that one of them was Frances St. Maxence, and the other one was, I'm going to forget his name, Joe, the bus driver.
Fillion.
Joe Fillion, the bus driver. the only bus driver that was left living that had not gone from our school, and he was the other honored guest. And was very, very good to we students. When we went to games, he'd stop and buy us candy bars or a soft drink or something else. He was just an outstanding person. We've lost Joe now, but another person that meant an awful lot to many of the students. Did you have much? Were you in charge of all the bus drivers too at the time?
Yes, I was. Bus drivers, but with Joe, he was the first driver. Well, let me go back a little ways. When we centralized, of course, we had to have buses. Joe was working for Arsene, Champlain Chevrolet Sales. And I went to Joe one night, one evening, and I said, Joe, we'd like to have you come with us. And so he did. He came with us, but we didn't have any garage. He was responsible for keeping the buses in repair and so forth. He did that in his backyard, rain or shine, and so on and so forth. He just did a wonderful job for me.
I've gone against the cardinal rule. When you mention a couple people, you may be leaving somebody out. And is there anybody else like in the caliber of Joe or Mrs. St. Maxon's that we should bring up at least, and that you can think of over the years you were there up until the '56 that we should not forget in any way?
Well, you mean?
But that wasn't a teacher, just that meant so much to the school. You know, Mrs. St. Maxon's and Joe, they were part of the family.
That's
like
right.
That, you know?
Joe was the first one. Well, other than, of course, part of the faculty, I could mention.
Oh yes, well we will there. But what about a long-time custodian?
Well, I had the best.
What's here?
Armand Cardan, Charlie, and Thompson.
Okay.
They were two good people. If they were going to have a storm tonight, they'd stay all night in the building.
Is that right?
They were two good people. Bob Thompson and Warren Cardan.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the families out there are glad to hear that. And
yeah.
All right, now faculty. Now we can't name everybody because they're all in the books here. But can you think of any instances?
Well, I wouldn't. I could name a number of them, but
yes.
I will name one person. That's Bud Moore.
Okay.
Bud Moore started with me as a teacher in junior high school, 7th and 8th grade. And then he had 45, 50 students in that grade. But many teachers would complain with that number of students, but he did a good job, went on and so forth. Eventually become my high school principal. And Bud really was my right-hand man. He took care of things down in that end of the building. And the only things that were brought to my attention was something that was rather serious, and then it was brought to my attention. Other than that, he took care of and I have a lot of respect for him.
Over those years from 44, 42 to 56, there comes a time that, were you out of salary schedule then for the teachers? Was there, or could you give raises when they were deserved?
Well, the unions came in, the teachers organized, well, it must have been the middle 1950s or along that period of time. Before then, it was entirely up to the Board of Education, and they would have one meeting, and they would say, this is what we're going to give the teachers this year, and I'd draw up a salary agreement for each teacher. But after the teachers unionized and the custodians and the bus drivers and so forth, well, then it was according to schedule. But this is interesting. After I became principal, I never had a contract with the Board of Education. The only thing I ever had was a salary statement, but I never had a one-year contract, two-year contract. They could let me go anytime they wanted to without any problem because I had no contract. And the way they would determine my salary is before the unions, they would go over the teacher's salary and they'd say, now we're going to discuss your salary, you leave the room. So I left the room and came back in and they said, well, your salary for next year is going to be so much. I said, okay, that's fine. And I got a salary statement, but I never had a contract with them.
How do you explain that? Why wouldn't you have one? Or you didn't need one, maybe.
I wanted one, but I never requested one.
You never requested one, yeah.
If they wanted to fire me, why, okay.
You were comfortable with the board, always?
Always comfortable with the board. And I never had a contract where all the other fellows had a 5-year contract or 2-year contract or whatnot.
Can you ever remember when you were principal back there, you said, I never should have gone into this, I should not have gone in the education field? Were you ever
No,
even when I was there, you weren't that way?
No, I really enjoyed it, and I really, I fell into something that I really liked, and I enjoyed it. I'd do the same thing right over again if I had that opportunity.
You know, you learn a lot from your parents, you learn from others. And the honesty that I have, I owe a lot to this man right here. I can remember I was president of my senior class in 1946, and we were having a dance, and we didn't have big dances, but we had ordered soft drink, and I remember having it downstairs from this side, under a little cubby hole there, and the night they're going to have the dance, I'm getting it ready, and I notice there's 2 bottles of soft drink gone. And I figured, well, now I'm going to have to account for this, so, of course, I figured the thing to do is to tell the boss about it, and the boss, of course, is Mr. Maher. And I went and told him that someone had taken 2 bottles of soft drink, and I'm waiting for him to tell me, well, that's awful for those people to do that, and don't worry about it. But he didn't say that. He told me it was my fault. You told me, as I remember, it was my fault, in a sense that I had left it in a position where I exposed it to people who didn't have the willpower to not take it. And that don't blame those kids, because I was just as much at fault as they were for making the occasion there. And I learned a lot from that right then, that you don't just, like you say, listen to the other side. And I said, you know, maybe I did. There was somebody didn't get many soft drinks, and they decided it was there, and I kind of tempted them. And so I refrained from doing that from now on. So that what I didn't learn at home in integrity and honesty, I learned from this man here and his staff. And I've always appreciated that, Mr. Maher.
Well, thank you.
We'll be right back. We're talking with Dan Maher about the old days here in Champlain. Not that old, but 40, 50 years back. And we're going to come back, and then I promise we'll get a little bit about this merger, and then his years when the school was very big, when mowers came in and so forth. Thanks for tuning in to Hometown Cable. Rouse's Point coming in, so for 2 or 3 years, you had 2 buildings, but there was 1 class, and then you got together for dances, teams, and so forth. Big problem?
Not a big problem. Worked out fairly well for the time. Of course, it was better when we were all get together in the 1 building, but it worked out okay.
You alternated graduation sites, one in Champlain, one in Rouse's Point at the time, alternate years, I think.
Yes, I think
for a couple of years that happened.
Yeah.
Did you have a principal over in the school in Rouse's Point in charge?
Dwayne Letard.
All right, but he was but you were principal here.
That's
you weren't
right.
superintendent at that time.
Well, no, I had charge. I was the supervising principal.
Okay, so he was like an assistant to you.
That's right. And then when we moved into the building, Dwayne still was he became a high school principal then.
Mm-hmm. At the new school.
Yeah.
All right. Then that was in '59, I think, as I recall. Do you remember? I think it was nearly 70 before Moore's came into the picture. During this time, you're still Champlain Central, I think.
Yeah, Moore's didn't come in until. Rouse's Point came in about 58, 59.
Yep.
Moore's came in about 70. Oh yeah, about 70.
70, I think. So those years.
Oh, Rouse's Point came in about 50.
57, I think, when they merged, but they didn't get into the new building until '59. And 70, as I remember Mr. Vogan telling us, and there was a big problem on that, too, to start. You know, Moore's was whether they're going to get in or not, but that was another money deal, good advantages. And then they all came down to school here. And if you remember back when they were making a Board of Education, then they had an unwritten rule, so many from Rouse's Point, so many from Moore, so many from Champlain, for equalization. Remember all that?
Yeah.
And you just didn't run against anybody. It was an unwritten division we had.
That's right.
That isn't there anymore.
No.
That doesn't happen anymore.
No.
And I'm not sure whether the centralization as we have it today is good or not. And I'm not asking you to comment about it. I think maybe we've lost that little bit where they used to be able to have 5 basketball teams of 8 men each. Now you only have one. We didn't have to win all our games at Little Champlain Central against Moors, but we had fun, and it was more. And I know it's not only sports. I realize that there's more advantages, but I think sometimes you just get too big. I feel sometimes that, but that's the story today. Beekman Town has got most of it. You got Northern Adirondack, a large curriculum. Peru never really got too much. They didn't merge with anybody at all, did they?
No, but Peru's big.
Big, but that was because of the air base a lot. And a lot of people living in the area.
Of course, we say big, but you take some of these city schools.
Oh yeah,
Which thousands.
Yes. I don't want any part of that. I don't really want any part of that. So there came a time in 1975, 76. Dan Maher says, "What am I doing here? I've been at this long enough. I've been here for 40 years, right? And how long did it take you to say, I'm going?"
Well, one of the things that made me start thinking about it was the fact that I was having a problem with my hearing. It wasn't bad, but when it reached the point where in a public meeting, when my secretary had to sit right beside me and somebody in the back asked a question, I had to say, "What did he say?" And it got a little bit embarrassing. And the same thing is true in the classroom. I was not able to follow as accurately as I should. So that was one of the things that made me start thinking about retiring. And I did. But of course, since then, if I were to do it over again, I would stay on for a few more years.
You would have.
So, if I were to do it over again.
Are you telling me that retirement isn't all you thought it might be? Or you don't have enough to do? You're not active enough? Or what is it?
Well, I don't think retirement is I don't know where they get this idea of the golden age.
You don't? I love it. I love it. I couldn't be here. I'd be out working today instead. I'm donating my time. Of course, there's a lot of things, and I don't have enough time. Really, I don't have enough time.
Well, that's true with me. I have to keep busy.
Mm-hmm.
I have to keep moving.
But you don't find that hard to do?
No, I don't. But,
what are you doing here in Florida?
Well, in Florida, I work a couple of days a week for my son. I pick up the papers at his office and take them into the county building in Naples and have them issue me permits for him to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the time, I'm busy around the house, mowing the lawn or doing something. I'm busy.
How many grandchildren do you have?
I have, I have 2 in Florida, and then Danny has 3, and Sheila has 3. Mary doesn't. Pat has 2 of his own and two stepchildren.
Mm-hmm. So. And they're the only ones near you right now.
Yeah.
Pat's the only one.
Yeah.
Because the rest of them are away. Is there anything else that I have not covered you thought I was going to, and that you're going to be angry if I don't cover?
I don't know who's going to be dumb enough to listen to this.
Well, you could tell them out there, make sure you do not to leave. You used to tell us not to leave and so forth,
Okay, be sure and listen to the whole thing.
There'll be a test on it, right?
Surprise at the end.
That's right. We should have told them that in the beginning. No, I don't know of anybody, really, except the new arrivals here in the past 3-4 years, that life has not been touched by Dan Maher and his family. It just isn't anybody.
Well, that's very nice of you to say that.
Good or bad. Now, they're not all good. I don't know. But certainly, you've had an influence on my 3 children. You had a big influence on me, which affects my children because I try to pass on what I've learned from you. It wasn't all math and history that I learned from you, and it shouldn't be either. It shouldn't be. And I learned not only from what you said, but from example. I've learned from example. I think that's the big thing today.
Well, the people in the North Country here have been very good to me. And I've always felt that way. And of course, I reciprocated by I did a lot of work outside the school. I'm in the Chamber of Commerce for years, and Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and everything you might mention. My wife has told me, I don't know, many times, you never spent any time at home. You'd come home from school and eat supper and put on a white shirt and take off again, which was true. I mean, also for a long, long time, I didn't think that anything that was going on at the building, I had to be there. If a bus was going to Saranac, I had to be on the bus. For a long time, that was the way it was. So, but the people, I don't know. I just the people in North Country have been very, very good, and I've got a lot of friends up here.
I don't know how much time we got left in that camera, Calvin. We're winding down. Have we got another couple, 3, 4 minutes? I think we certainly, and I'm not letting it go by. I don't forget these things, but politics. We can't really call local government politics because it isn't. But you served on our village board for 2, 3 terms?
21 years.
Well, I wasn't at all the meetings, I see. 21 years on our village board. Now, this is after school is over, right? And that takes a lot of time. And that's not always, I know I've caused you grief on some of those things, but I remember you're standing up for me when I was having trouble hooking into the sewer line and as to whether I could be given a dispensation, and you were the one that asked and said, I think you should. Yeah. You came up and checked out the situation, and I thank you for that. And you were very active. 21 years is a long time as a...
But I enjoyed that, and I worked with some wonderful people, Cliff LaPlante and Alan Maher, a lot of people.
Thankless sometimes, a thankless job, I think, sometimes.
Well, it didn't pay that much.
No, well, no, but just that they don't say many good things about you too many often, I wouldn't think. You know, it's true, it just don't.
But it was good. I enjoyed it. And also, I did a lot of work. Of course, I was not the only one, but I was with the Chamber of Commerce at that time. And when the road was, Northway was going through here, John Craig and I and others, Alan Maynard and the rest of us, did a lot of work, a lot of correspondence. Same thing is true with the customs, head of the customs being built where it is built today. There was a lot of correspondence. We expressed our feeling in many ways.
When they built the medical center, were you on that committee too?
I started it, but I was not on the committee that actually drew up the outline and so forth.
Well, I think with someone in the position you have, you're asked to be in a lot of these committees, mainly just to have your support. When they see your support, many people say that must be good, or Dan wouldn't be there. I guess, you know. I say Dan, they're talking. No, I'm not saying Dan. They're saying Dan. I'm repeating it. You know, but it's got to be. There's, you know, and you're a big influence around the community, not only to the kids but to the parents. In your church, you're very active in your church. You know, you don't miss many church Sundays, I know.
No, I try to be there. But, well, anyway, I was very happy.
Good.
I don't know, just a strike of good fortune, I guess, that I happened to land in the North Country.
Okay, our good fortune. Anything you can think of, Calvin, that I didn't ask?
No, just that, you know, my father, just like you are, he's 72 years old and he still calls this man Mr. Maher.
Well.
And I always enjoy, and I always do manage to see your father at least once or twice a year, and I do enjoy talking to him.
Let me tell you something. 15 years ago, when he was a school bus driver, wasn't he, Carl?
Yeah.
He could have run against you with the students and ran a close second, or if he didn't beat you. The students love that man. Yeah. I said, I can't believe the way those students gathered around Carl Castine.
Yeah. Carl was always good with them, and they liked him.
They sure did. They sure did. And we see him. Because you know his real name is not Carl. You knew that, didn't you?
No.
You didn't know his real name? No. We have to check it in the book here. That man's name is Carlton Castine. We got to call him by his full name. Yours is Daniel Maher, and he is Carlton Castine, right out there. Hi, Carlton. Calvin's dad and a relative of my father's, of course, my stepfather and of mine from way back.
He's still very active.
Yes, and you know, he went on, you know, to the town. I'm sure he always misses not being able to graduate because of his father dying, had to take over the farm. You know, he was in that class of 1940.
I remember now, his father dying.
Yep, that big class of 1940, that strong class of 1940.
Yeah.
That we're going to be having the reunion again next year. We're planning it for...
I'm looking forward to it.
We certainly are looking forward to seeing you, all the people there, to see you again. It'll never replace the one we had because there were too many years that had gone by
Yeah.
that people hadn't seen. Now it'll be 5
I
years.
enjoyed that. I saw so many people walking up to you and I said, "What's your name?" I enjoyed that.
Well, it's good. That's what it was for. That's what it was for. And we hope all you people out there locally who didn't make it, more of them locally didn't make it than away, we hope that you reconsider and come this next time. We've been talking with Dan Maher, the principal, arriving here in Champlain 1935 as a young teacher just out of college at Hobart, and Hobart has come around the full circle. Now a scholarship's been named, been made in his name there at Hobart, and he's very proud of that, and so are we. And that was Willis Adcock that did that, one of your students in 1940. Anything else, Mr. Maher, that you want to bring up at all?
No, I think we've covered it pretty much.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And
Very
we hope, how long, when are you leaving for Florida?
We're leaving for Florida September 28th.
Oh, we got him about 2 or 3 weeks away. That's all we got. We missed you last year by 3 days, and we got you in this time. We've been wanting to do this for over a year, by the way, more than that. But this way you knew more than you would have a year ago, though. See, so we got more. It's longer now than it would have been.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. It's an opportunity for me to express appreciation to the people that I have known through the years and have worked with me and so on and so forth. It's been a great... I've enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. And we hope you've enjoyed. And when you see Mr. Maher, I don't know if this will be on before he leaves. It's going to be on before he leaves, Calvin?
Yep.
It's going to be on before he leaves. So if there's a week left, you can give him a call at home and tell him you didn't know all those things. And thank him personally when you see him for all he's done for you, your students, your father, your mother, your relatives. This man has done an awful lot for our area. He's had an effect on everyone's life in this area, one way or the other, good or bad, whatever, in the village, the scouts, and teaching. Thank you very much, Mr. Maher.
Very welcome. Glad to be here.